All right. What's up, Aish people? Very stoked to be here tonight. Excited to have all you guys on. My name is, you got it right there, Ari Sasha. I'm one of the rabbis here in East New York. Very excited for this program. You know, in Judaism, there's a term that's called hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha pratis is that the idea and the concept that everything has a purpose, everything has a reason for happening. You know, the beginning of the Torah, it's interesting. Many people have said some of the most radical statements ever to come out of the Jewish people, maybe the most radical, are the first three words of the Torah, the Bible. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. For thousands of years, philosophers, scientists would be making fun of us, in the beginning, right? Aristotle, there's no beginning. The world always existed. Matter's eternal. What are you guys talking about? And that kept going on up until the 1960s, actually, when finally, the final piece to the idea of the Big Bang, that there was a starting point to the universe. Now, sometimes you hear science and religion, you're like, oh, it's like two opposite ends of the spectrum. How do we deal with that? And from a Jewish perspective, we look at it, whenever science is uncovered, we see how it's more and more aligned with our philosophies, with the Torah, with our ideas. Because we've been saying that there's a starting point to the universe. Science wants to put it on this or say it's that. We've always stated that something cannot come from nothing. And that this world, this universe, was created by God, was put into motion by God. And not only did God create the universe, but we believe through the Torah that he's actively involved. In fact, every day in our morning prayers, listen to this. I'll say it in English. What do we say? He illuminates the earth and provides light for those who dwell on it with compassion. And in his goodness renews every day continually the work of creation. Which means that every day we say that not only did God create the world, but he renews his creation every day. That means he's active every day in this world. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing we say, when we open our eyes before anything else, Moda'ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba amunatecha. We thank you, God. Moda'ani lefanecha. We thank you, melech chai v'kayam, King, eternal King. Shechazarta bi nishmati, that you have returned my soul. B'chemla rabba amunatecha. And that you have faith in me to get up and to do and fulfill my purpose in life today. And this is how we view life. And this is why I'm so excited. I'm super stoked to have our guest on tonight, especially with everything that's going on now. He's someone that I've stalked, I've seen, besides his message, his positive energy, his way about him. And I want to bring him on now, SQuire Rushnell. SQuire is an American author. I Wikipedia'd you, an inspirational speaker and former television executive. His books in the When Godwinks series have appeared on the New York Times bestsellers. He was a successful television executive. I didn't even know this, who led Good Morning America to first place for the first time. I'm a big Michael Strahan fan. I know he's on there now. And he's brought his message out to the world. Many of you have seen some of his Hallmark movies. Some of his books have inspired some of these movies. So please, without further ado, let's bring on SQuire. SQuire, you there?
I am here.
There you go.
How you doing, Rabbi Ari?
Right. So I'm like, I can't hide my enthusiasm, my excitement.
I love it.
But the first thing, before we even get to you, I gotta ask. You gotta tell me what's, like I said, I told you before, I'm from Long Island. Not too many Squires here in Long Island. So the name is phenomenal. I love it. But what's up with that Q? Tell me, why is that Q like right out there, capitalized.
Well, you know what? It is such a simple little idea. When I was at ABC, you mentioned I was a network executive at ABC. When I was at ABC for 20 years, before we had computers and texts and everything else, and people would send me a memo, and I would write on the memo, and I would then assign it SQ, capital S, capital Q. So those are my initials. And so when my youngest daughter graduated with her little marketing degree, and she worked for me for 1 week at the ABC headquarters building on 6th Avenue in New York. And she was my little secretary when my secretary was away. And so when you have a daughter who's working for you, there are no proprieties. She walks into meetings and kind of, she's a daughter, she kind of walks in on things. And she walked in on a meeting and she said, "Dad, I'm out there typing letters and that little Q looks funny." And she was writing Squire with a little Q because she had always seen the big Q. And she said, "Why don't we have a big Q and then you'll have a logo?" And I said, "Whatever you want, honey." And so I thought that was my moment to kind of fight back against spell check and the computer system in the world. And it was also something I could do for my daughter. And I didn't think Squire was unique enough. So I thought spelling it with a capital Q would make it different.
Of course, definitely worked. The first thing that popped out, but anyway, that little side talk. But now let's get down to business here, because as your hat reads, the Godwink, and it's a term that I believe you brought in and you made a reality. So maybe you could talk a little about what's up with Godwink. What is a Godwink? How did you get to this idea? When did this whole thing start? And kind of bring us through till today.
Well, it starts really with the word coincidence. And when I was at ABC and I was running Good Morning America, and I would stand in the back of the control room, and every time I heard one of those stories that began like, "Ironically today," I would say, "I wonder if it's one of those coincidence stories," which had always fascinated me. And for example, I remember the first time that it really struck me very strongly when I was hooked on American history, and I was reading about the leaders of the Declaration of Independence. And there were 3 guys who had more to do with that than any others: John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a lot older, but and so he died before the other 2. And John Adams became the second president of the United States, and his vice president was Thomas Jefferson. And they had very healthy careers. But the most important thing that they ever did was the writing of the Declaration of Independence. And those 2 guys were on the subcommittee, along with Franklin, to put together that Declaration of Independence. Now, Adams's job was to sell it, and Jefferson's job was to write it. And so these 2 guys, even on their gravestones, the Declaration of Independence is listed as the most important thing they ever did, even more than president. So here is where I got in the stories of those 2 men. They both died on exactly the same day. And it wasn't just any day. They both died on the 4th of July, the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, I said, wow, what are the mathematical odds that these 2 events should happen in that kind of a way? And so I later searched for to try to find out who was the president in 1826, in the year they died, because surely he would have done a eulogy and said something about the fact that these two guys died on the same day. And I couldn't find a thing. And I was sitting in my New York apartment. We were talking a few minutes ago about how small New York apartments are. So my dining room was 8 feet from the other wall, and I had a couch on one side, and there was a bookshelf on the other side. And so I was starting to write my first book, When God Winks, but it wasn't called that at that point because I hadn't come up with the word Godwink. But I thought, who the heck was the president in 1826? I walked across the room, pulled a book off the shelf about presidents, had nothing to do with, it was John Adams Jr., John Quincy Adams. Right. And so, but there was another little ugly book right next to it on the shelf. And I thought, what is this little ugly book doing on my shelf with good-looking leather-bound books that make me look smart? Never read a one. But I pulled it off and I looked at it, and I was reminded that I brought this book back from my grandfather's funeral. And I opened it up. It was printed in 1853. And the book was called Webster's Orations. It was a collection of speeches by the greatest speaker of the day, Daniel Webster. And the first speech that was printed in this book was the eulogy to Adams and Jefferson. Exactly what I was looking for. And it was all about coincidences. And so I think that this is significant. I think I have been divinely aligned to this book at this time. And then I wondered if this book, if some a history professor told me about this book, and could I find it in a library? So I went to my library. There was nothing there. I went on the keyboard. I went across the nation looking through the threads of libraries to see if I could find another copy of Webster's Orations. I could not. And somehow or other I thought, I wonder if this is a real book. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not validated. Right. I eventually got to Washington, D.C. and went to the Library of Congress. And there they had one copy of this book. So as far as I know, there's the one copy at the Library of Congress, and there is the one copy that my grandfather had, and I don't know how. But this was just mathematically beyond my comprehension as to how all of this could come together. And so anyway, coincidences was the beginning of where I was going. Eventually, I got to a point where I realized that coincidence was not the word. In fact, tell me if I'm correct, or that people who have told me this are correct, that the word coincidence doesn't even exist in the Hebrew language.
Right. Well, there's a word, actually, it's very interesting. This is very cool. You'll like this one. There's a word called mikra. Mikra means like a happening, like it just happened to come on. But listen to this. My rabbi, he passed away a few years ago. He's, lives in Israel. And he said to me, if you take that word, mikra, which I guess, doesn't directly mean coincidence. It means it happened along the way. Something just happens, kind of, the same thing. That same word, mikra, mem, kuf, resh, hey, he says Hebrew word. And you rearrange the letters, spells rak me Hashem, rak me hey, only from God. The same word's happening. It's a little play because rak me hey, hey is the first letter of the name Hashem, which is how we refer to God. But rak me Hashem is the same word if you take the letters. If you look through the coincidence, you know what I'm saying? He says, and you scramble around, it's only from God. So that's the closest thing I'd say we have to the word coincidence, is a mikra happening, So that's the idea. But
well, as I moved along, I realized that coincidence was not the word that I needed.
Right.
Because in the dictionary, a coincidence is the description of two events that come together unexpectedly
Right.
without causal connection.
Right.
And that's kind of what, okay, a scientist or a mathematician needs to have something like that.
Right.
But that doesn't describe what we're talking about.
Right.
Because a Godwink are two events coming together unexpectedly with causal connection. And that causal connection, of course, is God.
Yeah.
And so I really wrestled with that for a long time. And my wife and I, we would talk about it. We'd pray about it. We'd talk to people about it. We try to, what is a coincidence? I mean, we spent 6 months on just that question in talking to people about it. And one day, that little word Godwink just kind of floated into my mind. And I thought, wow, that's kind of a fun word. It's not threatening to people who, are a little afraid of religion. And I had just written my first manuscript, and I went through that, that change the word technique that you can do on a computer. I took out all the coincidence words and put in Godwink, and it fit. It fit. But even more important, Rabbi, people started hearing it. It fit into the language. It filled a vacancy in the language. And so that, I think, is probably the greatest gift of what that book has done, is it's introduced a new word to the language that describes a connection to God. And what I love the most about Godwinks is that it gives people a connection, a tangible connection to God. For those of us who have had times in our lives where we wondered, was God really listening to me, an invisible God that I can't hear or see directly? I just have to have faith to know he's there. A Godwink, when it happens to you, is like a communication directly from God that becomes tangible.
Wow.
And I think that's the best thing about it.
That's amazing. First of all, the name is phenomenal. I love that it's such a catchy. Well, I think that's why too. Godwink, because it's like, it's loving. It's kind of like, I'm there for you. I got you. When someone winks at you, it's always like, yeah, I know you're there. Like, maybe I can't like have a full conversation with you, but like, I got you. You're in my vision now. And like, so I think it's a phenomenal, name, Godwink. I mean, I think
just on your very thought.
Yeah.
When I now remember when that word came into mind, I thought of us as kids. Those moments when we were kids, when we were too small to sit at the big table, but maybe once in a while we'd get a chance to sit at the big table, and we'd be a little nervous, and we'd look up and we'd see that somebody that we love at that table was looking back at us. Right. They were smiling. And then they gave us a little communication, a quiet communication, a wink. Now, we never said, what do you mean by that? We knew. You know what? We knew it meant, hey, kid, I love you. Right. Hey, kid, I'm proud that you're sitting here with us. You're at the big table.
Right.
That is what God is saying with a Godwink. Right. I'm proud of you.
Right.
I love you. I want you to know that I'm listening and I'm paying attention to you. You matter.
Wow. That's so beautiful. So, I mean, I'm sure you've heard many stories, many people have, sure, written books and books and books. And I just saw, and I was researching you. I told that before you were on, I was stalking you a little bit and seeing all these, seeing all the YouTube clips and the Hallmark movies and everything else that you do, which is amazing. As a rabbi too, to be able to reach such a wide audience, that in itself is a big responsibility. So, and especially with a message like this, and especially in today's day and age when, we see everything going on, like I said, I don't even think this is a coincidence that you happen to come on today. After all the insanity, we can use a little positivity, a little meaning in life of like, whoa, but it's, when you listen to these stories, and I'm sure you hear a lot of them, do you believe that everybody out there has a Godwink moment,
Oh,
and it's up for them to kind of interpret it or look at it? And what's your opinion on that, or is it just only a few people?
well, the answer to that question came to me when a young television producer was all excited about Godwinks one day, and it was like a new word for her, and she said, "God has given you eyes to see Godwinks." And I thought, yes, he has. He's given us all the eyes to see Godwinks. And we don't see things that we're not looking for. And so often in times of in all walks of life, we just are oblivious to things that are around us that really come from God that we need to see. And so these little communications, I say, are like a person-to-person call from God out of 8 billion people on the planet. 8 billion people. And he's communicating right to you when you get a Godwink. That's a person-to-person call from God. And that's special. And now just imagine if God is calling you and you don't hear the phone, you missed the call.
Right.
What a shame that is, that you're walking through life and you don't hear the calls from God. If you don't see the Godwinks, you're not connecting with God. God is connecting with you and you're not connecting back. Now, the other question that people ask all the time is, how do I get more Godwinks?
Right.
And I think the simplest answer is to pray. Because when we talk to God in prayer, he is listening to us. And so how does he talk to us without verbalization, without using human language? He speaks through Godwinks and other things that he does that make himself known. And so so I think that understanding what a Godwink is something that we can all learn. And the more we pray, the more we'll anticipate Godwinks and be able to see them. Yeah.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. On that point, I'd say in this day and age, why it's so important. Obviously, you're, I'm a man of faith. You're a man of faith, and
Yes.
there were times when, from the Bible, miracles were kind of more open and more. You talk about, as a Jew, Passover and the splitting of the sea, and God revealing Himself at Sinai to the Jews. And then over time, things kind of slow down in that realm. And I think that's another reason why the Godwink is such a great name, because it's kind of like they're there. You just have to open your eyes to see them. They're not going to be these open, split.
Right.
But then again, perspective, right? To me, after getting married, and all of a sudden, 10 months, whatever, 9 months, 10 months, there's a live child in my home that just happened to have grown in my wife's stomach like some alien pops out. I mean, it's all perspective. Miracles in general, I hold too. It's the miracles are just things that we got used to. It doesn't mean that the miracles of life every day, and that's why I say the first thing in the morning is kind of thank you for giving us life again. Thank you for opening our eyes, giving us the energy to get up and go about our day. All these things that we have in life that we chalk up to science and this and that, they're just miracles that we get used to, I think. So it's kind of like these coincidences, like you say, things that don't normally happen, then it kind of wakes us up that maybe everything's a miracle, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There was a famous evangelist in about 1650 in England. I guess he was pretty important. They made him a sir. So Sir William Temple.
Mm,
And he had a great quote. When I pray, coincidences happen. When I don't, they don't.
right,
And
right,
we paraphrase that now all the time. When I pray, Godwinks happen. When
right,
I don't, they don't.
right. Do you have any maybe you could tell us, you have any like recent stories? And I would say in today's day and age too, it's so to see a God wink with computers and phones, and like, I look at my kids, like I don't even think they can notice a God wink, because they're just, God,
Oh, I
they're doing this
know.
Instagram winks and Snapchat and TikTok winks, but like to get their
Yeah.
head out of the phone and technology. So I'm wondering, like, any recent kind of God winks or stories that maybe you could share with us, or something cool that.
Let me tell you a topical one.
Yeah.
That it was a Christmas Eve story, and it's a story that took place in McAllen, Texas. I don't know whether you know where McAllen, Texas is.
No.
If you picture the state of Texas, there's that
Yeah.
long tail that goes down. If you think of the bottom of that tail, the very bottom, that's McAllen, Texas. That's
Gotcha.
right on the border. That's
Right.
right on the border. And so the temperature there is, a cold day in winter is 75,
Wow.
in McAllen, Texas. Never snows and so forth. So Tony and Tony Espinosa, that's a woman, Tony, and David Espinosa, wonderful Catholic couple, be on the border, Spanish name, a lot of Catholics there. And they told me their story when my wife and I were speaking there at one time. Tony was about 40 something, and he was having heart issues. He went to a heart doctor, and they said, "You've got a serious problem. You need a heart transplant." So your heart is actually working at 10% of its capacity. That's you, and you need a heart transplant. He talked to 3 other doctors and got same story. They went 5 hours up to Houston, and he spent days at the Houston Medical Center there, and they confirmed, and they put him on a list to get a heart transplant. They said, it'll probably take 9 months, and then we have an issue because you have to put it in right away. You have to do, it's ideally 2 hours, and you live 5 hours away, so, we have to be concerned about that. And so Tony and David came back to McAllen, and you can imagine they started praying, because they started worrying, could they get a donor? Could they get a donor fast enough before David died? And even if they got a donor, could they get up there fast enough, and all those issues? Well, Tony put up started praying, and got the neighbors to pray, got the village to pray, and for David to be able to get a donor. And it was about 3 weeks into this process when she started realizing that there was something that was making her very uncomfortable. That somebody had to die in order for her husband to live. And she thought, something, God, this doesn't feel right. And so she decided that she was going to pray that David would just be healed, that God would heal him. And she started praying for that, and she and David prayed together, and then she said, God, I know you're going to answer my prayer because my faith is there. But, God, I've always loved to have a sign. I would just love to have a sign from you, God, that the prayer is going to come true. And so then she said, God, this is a sign I would like to have. I would like to have you make it snow in McAllen, Texas. on Christmas Day.
Mhm.
Well, she told that to her husband, and he kind of rolled his eyes a little bit. She told it to her best friend since kindergarten, and her best friend said, Tony, do you realize that it hasn't snowed in McAllen, Texas in 109 years? And at that time it was all gone and within about 3 minutes? She said, yeah, I know. But it's God's listening. On Christmas Eve, they went to bed at about 11:45, midnight. And one of the daughters went to turn off the backyard lights. And she said, Mom, you won't believe it. It's snowing. And so Tony went out, and this picture that we have of her with the snow coming down and speckling into her black hair and on the roses that are right next to her, all covered with snow. And the next day, of course, the kids get up and they make snowmen and they fan angels in the snow and all that kind of thing. The newspaper does a headline, First White Christmas in 109 years, or never in history. They'd never had a white Christmas before.
Right.
And so then 3 weeks later, they had a regularly scheduled appointment back up at the Houston Medical Center. It was the DeBakey Heart Institute in Houston. And they went through a battery of tests. And the doctor came out and said, David, I don't know what happened. You were completely well. You are now have a normal heart. And they knew, of course, that God had intervened, and those prayers were absolutely powerful.
Wow.
Now, that's almost not a Godwinks story. It's a miracle story.
That's more than a wink, huh? Right.
But a miracle is an amazing Godwink.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's interesting with the whole Godwink. It's like, obviously that's a story we that's like in your face. I have some personal Godwinks myself, I'm sure. My whole journey to the rabbinate was a complete Godwink. I was working in, I wasn't, I don't know if you can notice, I was younger. I was a little bit of a troublemaker, a little bit of a rabble rouser kid, partied, went to college, kind of turned around afterwards, decided to go and learn in yeshiva and study and connect to my heritage and to my creator. And then, came back, but then went into business. I was working in real estate, the stock market, and I remember how I started in this rabbinate field in terms of working. And it was I guess I'll tell the story now, I'll share it with you and I know the hundreds of viewers that are watching. But what happens? So I'm in business, kind of like, I was inspired for a while. I was learning, I was connecting, I was working with the younger generation, kind of helping them avoid the pitfalls that I made, spent some time in Israel. But then I came back, got married, kind of left that, went into the business world and just forgot about it. Didn't really pay much attention to doing what I was doing when I was, in that spiritual zone. And it was, I remember it was 2007. I was working in business. I'm like a handshake type of guy. You shake my hand. I'm like, business world, there's no place for me in that world, man. I'm like, yeah, I was very trusting. Anyway, I was getting messed over in this, that, so many things. Really, the bottom was coming out. And I remember sitting with my wife. My wife's name, it's not a Squire, but her name is Cookie. Close, Cookie, not too many cookies. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking to my wife one night, and I'm like, Cook, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I said, and I even said to her, I said, maybe there's an organization. We did a lot of, it was called the JEC. Sorry, H. That's where I started. But we did a lot of follow-up for Birthright, and they dealt with a lot of the young professionals in the city. And I knew the executive director because I studied with him in rabbinical school. So that night, I'm talking to my wife. Everything's coming down. I'm like, I can't. My stomach's falling. I don't want to become that type of person. That's not who I want to be. I'm not jumping into that world of business. That phrase like, oh, but this is business. I'm like, all of a sudden, business, like God doesn't exist, or law doesn't exist. Like, but this is business. anyway, so I said to her, Cook, maybe I should give the JEC a call. Maybe, maybe I love dealing with these kids. I loved it. I felt meaningful to me. Maybe they have a job for me. Maybe I should ask them. They're dealing with young professionals. I partied for a while. I'm studying for a while, kind of put those together and help the Jewish youth and, the young professionals in Manhattan. I'm in my office the next day and my phone rings. And it's the rabbi from that organization. He's like, hey, how are you? I'm like, hey, what's up, Reb Z? How you doing, man? He's like, I'm doing great. So anyway, I was speaking to some of the guys here and, we're wondering what you're up to these days because we're looking to hire someone and maybe you want to come work with us. And I remember, you're talking about a wink. I looked up and I just went like this. You win. I'm out. That was it. And I literally resigned from my company. And that's when I kind of started my journey back. But I do think, it's about picking up on these things and seeing them. There's a story, you'll appreciate this, is in New York. I'm sure you heard this. They say like a guy's rushing to a meeting and he's looking for parking in Manhattan. You know this story? And he's like, he's late, he's running late, and he's like circling. You know what it is to park in Manhattan,
Yes, right.
Like 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, he's like, God, just hook me up. I promise you, if you hook me up, I'm in. And all of a sudden a parking spot opens up. He's like, never mind, I got it. So that's like
oh yeah.
Yeah. That's like I guess it's not just the winking, but as human beings we have to be able to pick up on it and know and see that God's there for us and he created this world and it's a world of love and we're here to spread the love and connect and bring goodness to the world. And sometimes I guess we need that kind of little motivation and but I want to, going back to that story that you said in the beginning, how did you get into, I know I was watching and I heard the story about Lincoln and Kennedy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe how did you pick up on that? Did you just start researching all past presidents and like how, maybe tell the audience a little bit about that and like how you got to that? Because I think that's also fascinating.
Yeah. And part of, part of Godwinks is for us to open our eyes to be able to see them, but when they happen to us. But now what we have, my wife and I, she writes with me, is that we're just alert to Godwinks when they happen. And when we hear a Godwink story, then maybe somebody is telling us a story or they're just mentioning something that happened or we read something somewhere. It doesn't say it's a Godwink, but it's recognizing that that's what it is. And then to be able to write the story in such a way that it really lifts the Godwink up and makes it the shiny little acorn that is the prize in the Cracker Jack box, and then it's the thing that you really want to walk away from the book with. So we're always looking for stories, and we have a Facebook page we got 2 pages combined. It's about 300,000 fans that we go into homes every day. And I tell stories. My wife works on the Godwinkers, Facebook.com, and I'm at Godwinks.com. And it's Facebook.com/Godwinks actually. And then the website is Godwinks.com. So that what we do is that's a place where people can send us Godwink stories, and we're always looking for them. And then because I post a new Godwink story on the Facebook page every other day, and then I do a quote on the off days, I churn through an awful lot of Godwink stories. And now not many of them rise to that level where they actually go into a book. Mm-hmm. And a fewer number rise to that level where they'd be a Today Show interview, and even fewer would rise to that level to be a script for a Hallmark movie. Or now we're doing our first Netflix movie too. But we're always looking for those Godwinks. And here's the interesting thing: when people ask us, "How do you get those stories?" We actually pray about it. We Pray. That was the first of the Godwink movies on Hallmark, and that was a nice show we did in Houston. That's Houston in the background.
Wow.
And that's my wonderful wife.
Right. I saw her too. I saw her on some of the interviews also. She seems like also such great energy, positive. Look at.
Yeah.
How many years are you guys married for?
We've been married 21 years.
Wow.
And so we're madly in love, just as much in love as we were 20 years ago. And people will ask us, what is the most important secret of your marriage? And we say, what is so important to us? We've actually turned it into 2 books and a ministry, and that is partnered prayer. We advocate couples who pray, the most intimate act between a man and a woman. Partnered prayer is when you decide that you and your partner are going to pray together, your wife or even 2 family members, two best friends coming together and praying together 5 minutes a day for 40 days. And we just challenge them. That's the 40-day prayer challenge. And so what happens is that in our culture, partnered prayer is not promoted very much. Very often men get together and women get together and it's just not, we talk about prayer at the dinner table. We pray with our congregations at our synagogues and our ministry and our churches, but actually committing to praying together every day, a minimum of 5 minutes, which isn't that bad. It isn't. That's a little bit longer than it takes to brush your teeth and comb your hair. So it isn't a big commitment to God, but I also realize that it's a con job, because once you get into it, it'll be such a joy in your life. And you will say, why didn't I ever think of this? Or why didn't anybody ever mention this to me before? So that is our secret to our marriage. And it's our gift that we keep giving away. And we just keep urging people to pray together. And in fact, we have a plan when the time is right. And I think you'll agree that the time is not right now to do partnered prayer across the aisle in Congress. I don't think it's within the next month or 2. but both of the chaplains of the Senate and the House are enthusiastic supporters of this notion, and we're going to work together for a congressman to pray with another congressman of a different party 5 minutes a day for 40 days.
Please get that.
And we know that it will be incredible. Because it has saved marriages, it has healed families. It is just an incredible thing.
We need a lot of healing now. But I want to get back again, because I want to push this a little bit, because I really was blown away by this. Maybe about this we got off on when we showed a picture of your wife. Justifiably so. She's an amazing woman. Like I said, I watched you guys together in action, and it's unbelievable. You're an inspiration in that way as a couple. I believe. So, but I want to get back to this Lincoln Kennedy, because I don't think the audience knows this. Yeah. Maybe tell what it is, how you got to it. It's mind blowing, and kind of walk us through that.
Well, Lincoln and Kennedy. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was actually in Washington D.C. at the. There was a museum, a Franklin, or rather a Lincoln Museum there. That is basically right in the theater where he was shot, and they had a little book, and it was the coincidences between Kennedy and Lincoln, and they were just so mind blowing. And the list is probably about 13 or 15 that I put in my book, and I think it's in this book here, When God Winks, and I was just, I didn't have it. I don't know the exact page to go to, so I'm not going to look for it. But Kennedy and Lincoln were both born 100 years apart. They both were elected to the presidency 100 years apart. One was 1860, one was 1960. They both were, look at that. They both had secretaries. Now let's see. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln, Mrs. Lincoln, and Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy. That is amazing to me. I mean, they both lost a child during the presidency, and they both had very important contributions to civil rights. And it just goes on. And then, you know, the vice presidents, they both had vice presidents named Johnson. And those vice presidents were born in the same year, 100 years apart. And then the two assassins, Lee Harvey Oswald and John Wilkes Booth, both had all kinds of parallels. So these were just so many coincidences that you just had to say, there is something about this that has to be greater than just happenstance. The odds are too great.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible.
There's a lot of coincidences in history.
Right. I'm sure we can break them all, right? If you just keep researching. But I guess maybe that's life in general. If like, you know, like remember when I was younger, my mom would always tell me that my dad passed away when I was a little kid. And, you know, she said, like, if you take a puzzle, you know, and you just look at one piece of the puzzle and you're going to try and figure out the whole picture with one piece, you can't do it. I remember telling you. But as you keep putting the pieces together, as life goes on, as you live, you start seeing the bigger picture and you realize that you're not in control. You know, you're not painting the picture. You're in the picture. But like there's a lot more going on. But the more you kind of, you know, Google Earth out, as we say now in modern terms, the more, you know, you kind of see clearer picture of everything. So sometimes, right, you're not going to see that Godwink, you know, for a while. Maybe you may not see it at all. You know, and even I think if we don't see it, doesn't mean that it's not happening. You know what I'm saying? It's still happening. We're just, thank God some people are alert and they're catching, you know, and I do believe they're only catching very small piece of what the real winks are. You know what I'm saying? I think like it's much bigger than all of us. And, you know, they say in the Torah, it says that God is like, you know, is hidden and revealed. It says that the Kabbalists talk about it, that in a certain way he's hidden, meaning that God is, you know, we can't fully understand him because we're finite and he's infinite. He created us. So how can we possibly understand our creator? He's beyond our mental capacity. But yet, these are the ways, these little, like you're saying, these are the ways that he reveals himself. These are the ways that God kind of, you know, shows himself in this world. And it's up to us, though, to kind of, you know, pick it up and realize that it's there. And I think, you know, what you're doing is just phenomenal. I mean, and just to be able to talk with you, obviously, you know, we have different faiths, but we still believe in the same thing. We believe that there's a purpose to this world. We believe that there's a creator to this universe. And we look to that and say, hey, right?
Godwinks really have no boundaries between religion.
Right.
Jewish people have Godwinks. People of all faiths have Godwinks. Where geographically the Godwinks exist all around the world, and so it is something that brings us together. And I love the fact that that Godwinks can appeal to all people, and maybe atheists will have a little hard time with it, but agnostics, I know, love Godwinks because they don't say God, but they think it's some kind of power up there. Right.
Well, let me tell you, it's been such an honor and a privilege to have you on tonight, Squire. Really, you're an inspiration, and like I said before, I think, you know, in this day and age, you know, one of the things that we're doing here at AISH and one of the projects that we're trying to start up now is just really just reach the mass and not even talk about religion, or just to be conscious that there's a creator, that there's a Father in heaven that
Yes.
loves you, that cares for you. And we, at ACE, we just want to get that message out. Whatever we always say, like, religion, how you practice, that's between you and God. But we want to get the message out. We want to get the education out, at least. Like, just see it for yourself, whether it's through your text, whether it's through your learning and studying and growing, or walking in the street, to really connect to that. And I think that you and your wife are such a positive force here. And obviously your reach, congratulations, goes a lot farther. And you should be continue to be blessed with just bringing this concept of a creator out in the world, bring this concept that there is a creator to this world, there is a God, and he does care for all of us. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Actually, this is actually the first book, and there is a chapter in here on Beshert Godwinks stories.
There you go. Love it. But listen, I hope our paths meet again, maybe in a Godwink in the future, right?
Well, let's do it. Yeah, love it. I love that, Ari. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good luck with everything, and hope to see you soon. Okay.
Thank you. Good wishes for Godwinks.
Take care, man. All right, ACE people, we're out now. Thank you so much for watching. It's been such an interesting, amazing show tonight. I'm very honored and privileged to be a part of it. And for everyone that is tuning in, please look out for our episodes in the future. We have amazing guests that we bring on every week for you, and get in touch with us either online or email, and hopefully we'll see you guys soon. So good night. Shabbat shalom to everyone. Peace out.